Welcome to BurbNBougie News Recap. Here are a few of the news stories that I wanted to tackle for the day. Please go ahead and give them a watch and let me know which one resonated with you the most. Like, comment, share. We have been talking about the birth rate decline, and many women are opting out because of the cost of being a mother, because there is a motherhood penalty. When people talk about the wage gap disparities, there's a wage gap, but it's typically more so if a woman is a mother versus just being a woman, because single women are able to compete in the workforce a lot easier than mothers are. So there is a motherhood cost that is realized towards the end because we haven't built up that retirement fund, and being out of the workforce ends up costing us opportunities. But I want to get into this article. It's a long article from USA Today talking about the fatherhood premium and the motherhood penalty, what Nobel Prize economics winners research show. Sapna Arvind had always dreamed of having a big career in finance. My dad, when I was a child, would say, I want to see you on CNBC. So I did my undergrad in finance at New York University with those words ringing in my ears. Arvind embarked on a career in asset management in New York City after getting an MBA in finance from MIT Sloan School of Management in Cambridge, Massachusetts. By her mid-30s, she was also a mother of two children under the age of 10. While she powered through the early years as a young mother and a professional woman, by the time her younger one was ready for kindergarten, she didn't want to do it anymore. Commuting back to her home in the suburbs at 8 p.m. just as the kids were getting ready for bed, she decided to quit her job. Her husband, an investment banker, would be the sole breadwinner while she'd be the primary on-call parent. It's a decision scores of college educated women have made over the years, in which, in part, explains why the gender earnings gap is wider among college educated women compared with those without a college degree. In 2022, for example, women with at least a bachelor's degree earned 79% as much as men who were college graduates, while women who were high school graduates earned 81% as much as men with the same education level, according to Pew Research Center. This is also a topic Harvard professor Claudia Golden, 77, who received a Nobel Prize in economics for her groundbreaking work on women in the labor market on Monday, has spent decades studying. After collecting and analyzing 200 years of historical data to demonstrate how and why gender differences in earnings and employment rates have changed over time, she found that while historically the wage gap could be explained through differences in education and occupational choices, recently, the differences among men and women in the same profession widens after the birth of the first child. Golden's research also finds this trend. Differences in both pay and the ability to stay in the workforce reflect differences in the division of unpaid caregiving responsibilities between heterosexual couples. I talk about the unpaid labor all the time. It is unequal and is typically like 90% on the woman. Fatherhood premium, motherhood penalty. Golden's research has also found that while mothers make less than non-mothers because of the reduced number of hours they work, fathers make more than non-fathers over the course of their careers. Quite frankly, it's the most disturbing part of this. Why is it that fathers are doing better than non-fathers even though they have kids? Why is the fatherhood premium growing over time? The price of being a woman stays constant due to social norms around gender, which is also somewhat disturbing. Golden says women with children enable men with children to achieve more. Men are able to step forward because women step backwards. It's not simply taking the shirts to the dry cleaners that women do. They are boosting their ability to do work. And therefore, if you are by yourself, you don't have the ability to have that helpmate. See, see how they are taking our words that we have been consistently saying and putting it into a more educated college. It sounds very collegey the way they said this, but women are the support. And because of all of the things that we do in the background, it helps these men achieve their financial success, their career success, all of those achievements, because women are in the background doing the work that goes unnoticed and undervalued. The other explanation is the American notion of masculinity that places self imposed pressure to achieve more when you are a father. The internal sense that fathers have that they really have to run fast because they are the breadwinners. Let's talk about greedy work and flexible work. When it comes to college educated women, high salary jobs with long, inflexible hours exacerbate the gender pay gap. When women take on greedy work, which pays disproportionately more when they work a greater number of hours or have less control over those hours, they tend to not last long because they opt out to raise families. The pandemic, Golden says, had decreased the cost of flexibility as firms and workers have learned to use technologies to enable remote meetings. One of the big hurdles is business travel. It's an enormous barrier to individuals with care responsibilities. But if that job now has changed to you don't have to travel to Tokyo, you have to Zoom with Tokyo clients every other weekend, you can do it. Yes, the technology is changing the game and allowing women to still be able to compete as long as jobs have the flexibility that allows women to continue to compete. Making greedy jobs more flexible would allow women to take them. When Jane Vernon moved to the suburbs from New York City with two preschoolers, she worked for a Fortune 500 company that had offered her part time work during her early days of motherhood. What part time meant was partial pay for nearly full time work. But I made the deal because it allowed me to go to the office 3 rather than 5 days per week. Her hard work didn't go unnoticed. She was offered a promotion, but the catch was that needed to be physically present 5 days per week. Despite the fact that I excelled working part time, my hiring boss required FaceTime, being physically present every day of the week, and was not sympathetic to the demands of motherhood. She said that juggling family concerns was not relevant. See, this is where women start to falter because we cannot, I mean, you can, but you shouldn't be putting your children aside for a job, but you need a job to be able to raise those kids. Is a double bind, is a conundrum that men do not have to, that don't have to face this same thing. That's the reason why their successes can still just keep going up and up and up, where women end up plateauing. And this is what happens. She decided to quit her job. If she had the flexibility, things would have been very different. See, women have the capacity, the skills to multitask many of these things, but without having a job that's flexible, it constrains us. So our talent that we have goes untapped because we can't juggle all of this without society buying in. So this is another reason why the birth rate will continue to decrease because women are not, I mean, they don't want to do all of this. And then on the back end, when it comes to retirement or living comfortably, that money take a hit. Okay, she says, without a doubt, I would have stayed in the workforce. I did not want to quit my job. Her life as a Scarsdale's mom, one of the most expensive zip codes in the country, landed her in a familiar company, stay at home mom with degrees from prestigious universities and experience in the corporate world, including white shoe law firms, exclusive management consultancies, and Fortune 500 companies. So, just all this talent being untapped because society is unwilling to allow women to have the flexibility to work from home and be mothers at the same time. Something has to give. Anyways, you guys, this is a fairly long one, and mostly it's just going into other examples of what women have gone through. But you can see where this is going, that things just kind of need to change, or I foresee the birth rate continuing to decline, many women being one and done, and, it's just going to keep going that way until society decides, okay, we're going to let her work and be a mom at the same time, because some women are literally tired of this motherhood penalty. Y'all jump in and let me know what you think. This is a very sensitive topic. This story came out earlier this week. Understand that if you need to turn away because it could be very triggering, keep that in mind. A pastor is accused of making girl perform oral sex at 7 years old and eventually impregnating her at 16. That's what the records show. Court documents show 39-year-old Robert L. Carter, a Houston-based pastor, is in jail for allegedly essaying a family member hundreds of times over a decade and impregnating her. The SA started when the child was 7 years old, according to documents. Carter is accused of performing SA with the child and making her perform oral acts on him. Carter is also accused of trying to bribe the child with candy for these acts, which she says she refused. Court documents allege Carter would force himself on the girl while other family members were sleeping. The abuse went on for years, according to the court documents. The victim estimates she was SA'd by Carter hundreds of times, becoming an almost daily occurrence. The victim said when she turned 12, Carter started to grape her. She told investigators that Carter would stop at an HEB store on the way to school and SA her in the back parking lot. Investigators said in the court document that the victim told them Carter would take her to a church he worked at. Man, y'all. So he's taking her to a store, a church, doing this in her home. This is ridiculous and very troubling. When the girl turned 16, she reportedly had Carter's baby. She told investigators he dropped the newborn off at a nearby fire station. Carter is being held for on a $100,000 bond in Harris County Jail. There are no real words, because how do you get around this, especially since there is proof that there was sex between them, considering there was a baby made, and there's absolutely no way there could be consent at this young age. You guys go ahead and jump in and let me know what you think of this. Obviously, this is atrocious, and we have got to keep our heads on a swivel no matter anybody's profession and status and where they rank in the family. Are they family members? Please help protect our children. You guys jump in the comments. This is a story that perfectly demonstrates the importance of voting. Voting for Trump means that what he did with the Supreme Court will have continuing, lasting impacts. And what he did with the Supreme Court, taking it even more conservative, means that for a long time, for a generation, these policies that keep allowing Republicans to gerrymander will probably stay in place. This article: the Supreme Court appears determined to make it easy to draw gerrymanders. The Republican Party had a great day in the Supreme Court. Voting rights did not. So Republicans cannot just win based on, policy or whatnot. They are winning because they are gerrymandering. The Supreme Court's Republican appointed majority spent Wednesday morning seemingly hunting for a reason to uphold a South Carolina congressional map that everyone agrees was gerrymandered to the benefit of the Republican Party. The case is Alexander v. South Carolina State Conference of the NAACP. Under the Supreme Court's precedents, federal courts are not allowed to hear lawsuits challenging partisan gerrymanders, that is, maps drawn to benefit one political party or the other. But federal courts may hear challenges to racial gerrymanders, maps drawn to minimize the political power of voters of a particular race. A lower court struck down the South Carolina map because it determined that while the state's GOP-controlled legislature's goal was to shore up Republican control over the state's first congressional district, the legislature did so by excluding Black voters from the district. In South Carolina, about 90% of Black voters prefer Democrats to Republicans, so map makers could be quite sure that they were making the first district more Republican every time they removed a Black voter from it. So, given the court's previous ruling, what happens when a legislative map is both racial gerrymander and a partisan gerrymander? As the lower court found is the case in Alexander, the answer is supposed to be the map is illegal. As the Supreme Court held in Cooper v. Harris, the sorting of voters on grounds of their race remains suspect, even if race is meant to function as a proxy for other, including political characteristics. The plaintiffs in Alexander should also benefit from another well-established legal rule. When a trial court determines that a legislative map is impermissible racial gerrymander, the court said in Cooper, the lower court's findings of fact mostly notable as to whether racial consideration predominated in drawing district lines are subject to review for clear error. So I don't know how this is going to end up, but they're doing it in plain sight. They're doing it in plain sight. And people are like, they're letting it go because they can. Appellate courts, including the Supreme Court, may correct a lower court that applies the wrong legal rule in a racial gerrymandering case. But the Supreme Court is supposed to defer to the trial court's factual determinations regarding how and why a legislative map was drawn the way it was drawn. This is the part. Most of the justices, including several of the court's Republican appointees, acknowledged during Wednesday's oral argument that the Supreme Court's obligation to defer to a court's factual findings places South Carolina in a bind. Justice Clarence Thomas, for example, asked the very first question of John Gore, the former Trump administration lawyer defending South Carolina's maps. And that question focused on the fact that the court is supposed to review this clear error. But after Gore stepped away from the podium, all 6 of the court's Republican appointees appeared determined to find some way to uphold South Carolina's gerrymander. So they know the deal. They're okay with the deal. They're just trying to find some kind of legal precedent to wiggle around it. The courts appear to be falling back into its normal partisan pattern in voting rights cases. For years, the court's GOP-appointed majority was uniquely hostile towards voting rights plaintiffs, often fabricating new legal rules from nothing in order to weaken laws protecting the right to vote. This is why I started my video the way that I did. Voting has far-reaching implications, and continuing to allow these people, ours, are consistently trying to strip away our rights, and people are just going along with it, acting like voting means nothing. It is bigger than the presidential race. And I'm going to end it at that. I don't know how this will end up. When it happens, I will definitely report on it. But just know that these people are actively working to strip our rights overall, women's rights, gay folks' rights. They want to keep sanitizing history. They are doing all of this, and folks are just allowing it. You guys weigh in, like, comment, share. So much is going on in the medical industry, and this article and what's going on with Medicaid is par for the course. Nearly 2 million kids have been kicked off Medicaid this year. The Medicaid unwinding's terrible toll, explained in 4 charts. In the 6 months since states began double-checking the eligibility of people enrolled in their Medicaid program for the first time in 3 years, more than 8.5 million Americans have lost their Medicaid benefits. Based on enrollment numbers at the start of the year, that means roughly 1 in 10 people covered by Medicaid have lost their health insurance in a matter of months. After the U.S. saw its uninsured rate hit historic lows during the pandemic, millions of the most vulnerable Americans are now falling off the rolls with no assurance they will be able to find another form of coverage. Worse, many of those losing coverage are losing it because of administrative hiccups and would otherwise be eligible, a problem that is disproportionately impacting children. We won't know until next year's national insurance surveys how many people simply ended up uninsured and how many people successfully enrolled in another form of health insurance, health coverage, even as they lost their Medicaid benefits. But it is safe to expect that millions more Americans are now insured than were at the beginning of the year. Having Medicaid means people are more likely to see a doctor and keep up with managing chronic conditions. The program helps people live longer, so losing coverage will make it even more difficult for a population that already struggles with its health to stay well. Here's why this is happening. During the pandemic, Congress approved an emergency provision that prevented almost anyone from losing their Medicaid coverage. Even if you had a change in income or life circumstances that in normal times would have led you to leaving the program, you were allowed to stay as long as that emergency policy was in place. But that provision expired earlier this year. Part of the government standing down from its pandemic footing, and the states were tasked with double-checking the eligibility of every person who was on their Medicaid rolls, a process referred to as unwinding. Starting in April, they could remove people who they found were no longer eligible. So far, these are the aggregate enrollment losses by state. So look at this. The disenrolled at the top. Texas, Florida, California, New York. Look at how many of these people have been disenrolled. So at least, well, this looks like almost 9 million Medicaid enrollees have been disenrolled. That is 9 million. Before the unwinding began, the Biden administration and outside experts estimated that up to 15 million people could lose their coverage during the unwinding process. We are now more than halfway to the worst case scenario, with at least 6 months to go in most states. The fear that many people would end up losing coverage not because they were actually no longer eligible for Medicaid, but because they got caught in some kind of bureaucratic snag. States are supposed to do as much as they can to check people's eligibility with data they have on hand, tax data, information from food stamps, and other welfare programs. But states are limited in their actual capacity to perform those automatic checks. Based on the available data, that has been happening quite a lot. In most states, more than half of the people who have been kicked off Medicaid have lost coverage for an administrative reason, meaning somewhere along the line, there was an issue with their paperwork, not that they were no longer eligible. Experts are particularly concerned about children losing coverage when they shouldn't, and for good reason. The Biden administration announced last month that it had detected a problem with how states were conducting eligibility checks. A majority of states, as it turns out, were automatically disqualifying everybody in a family if they found out one person, most likely a parent, was no longer eligible. That approach might simplify the process for states, but it risks kicking eligible children off the program. Most states have more generous eligibility rules for children than they do for parents. So while a parent may no longer qualify for Medicaid, the child still might. The so it just sounds like, with all of the things that are going on, more paperwork means more people to do things, and that people are just, opting to do things the quicker way, not the right way. And it's impacting folks. But we have to remember that everybody is pretty much overworked, and people in these medical fields. And we have been talking about it, what's going on with nurses, what's going on with politics, pushing people out of certain states. And there are certain states that don't even want these governmental benefits. So I'm sure that they are understaffing on purpose. This is going to impact people. And think about if your child has childhood asthma, has anxiety, has mental health issues that need to be addressed, maybe with some meds. This is impacting all of that. So the government not being able to work together for the benefit of the people is really impacting everything. And the government consistently fighting each other versus working together, this is all playing a part in this. I'm going to wrap this now, but y'all get the gist. So many people are being kicked off, and there's not a particular reason outside of overworking folks and bureaucracy and politics. Y'all go ahead and weigh in with your thoughts.